The moon has an alarming message for Friday the 13th. Are you ready to listen? Hear that phrase as a bell, not a threat. A bell calling you to attention. The alarm is sharp, precisely because it asks you to choose how you will move through the day. It asks you to treat the moment differently, not with superstition, not with panic, but with strategy and care. There are two simple, decisive secrets ahead that will change what this date does for you. They are small acts of containment that protect what wants to form inside you. Listen closely. Most people treat Friday the 13th like any other calendar oddity and then wonder why they felt off. That's the point. The date itself does not decree fate. What matters is what we feed it, our collective expectation, our nervous attention, our way of talking about things. This is where the moon becomes more than a celestial object in a poem. She becomes a mirror. The moon in this telling reflects what you already carry. It amplifies what you have tended to in secret and what you have been dragging loudly into public. On days when the collective leans into fear or curiosity, that mirror simply returns a more concentrated image of whatever was already there. Imagine a seed buried in dark soil. In the soil, invisible to the passerby, something fragile is forming, a root, a shoot, an intention. That seed is your new idea, a tender relationship, a career pivot, a private longing you haven't yet named. The period before any birth is an incubation, a time in which shape and resilience are determined. Friday the 13th, in this symbolic frame, behaves like a threshold where the world's attention is more likely to bump against that tender forming. If the surrounding noise is loud, if doubts are spoken, if gossip spreads, if cynicism is flung like cold rain, then the fragile thing can stall, warp, or be misinterpreted. If instead it is kept in quiet warmth, allowed to knit itself, it is likelier to emerge whole. There is nothing mystical being claimed here. This is about human attention and co-regulation, about how other people's voices, expectations, and projections shape your experience. The moon's message is alarming because it asks you to exercise restraint at a moment when most people either shrug or dramatize. Restraint is not weak, it is sovereign. The day asks for containment, not confession, for discretion, not drama. Verse secret, protect the nascent desire. When something is new, an inkling, a plan, the insistence of a small love, treat it like an embryo. Do not parade it into the public square before it can stand. Keep your early-stage intentions private. Guard them with humility and a slow, deliberate voice. This is not secrecy born of fear. It is strategic cultivation. Think of the ways that early exposure can distort an idea. You tell a friend about a business concept, and their immediate reaction is practical concern. They point out the obstacles you haven't thought about. You hear that, your energy diffuses, and paradoxically, the thing that needed your tender faith now faces erosion by doubt. Or you announce a fragile relationship, and the gossip machine turns it into a spectacle. Commentary from the edges reframes it before you have defined what it means to you. Early praise and early critique both have similar effects. They impose shape too soon. The social field rushes in and tries to name and polish and test it before the thing is ready. On Friday the 13th, this dynamic intensifies, not because the date is inherently powerful, but because collective attention is more volatile. People look for meaning in the small and then tell one another what to expect. That shared expectation becomes a pressure. If you have a new project, an essay, a prototype, a relationship, consider intentionally reducing the number of ears you let near it. Tell only those who have shown capacity to hold without offering premature verdicts. Practice brief language. I'm exploring something is often all you need. Journal instead of posting. Draft instead of announcing. Test privately instead of asking the world to decide for you. There's also a moral tact to this. When you keep a nascent desire close, you avoid contaminating it with the projections of people who are not invested in your process. Others layer their fears, needs, and unresolved stories onto your idea. Your hesitation might be mistaken for failure. Their anxiety can become your trap. Privacy in the early stages is not just prudence, it's fidelity to your own creative economy. You respect the work required for formation by creating conditions where formation can actually occur. Short, clear line to mark this. Protect the beginning. Let things ripen. Second secret, contain the doubt. On a day like Friday the 13th, people are primed to share anxieties as if that will buffer them. It does something else. It multiplies doubt. When you say out loud, "I'm nervous about this," you invite the collective to co-regulate in a downward direction. The emotion spreads. Doubt becomes a social contagion. It moves faster than conviction. Words about fear have a gravity to them. They draw more fear. The mechanism is simple and psychological. Humans are built to respond to one another. If the field is tense, it feeds your tension. If the field is composed, it supports your composure. So on this day, do not voice every inner waver. That does not mean bottle everything up until you combust. It means choose where you give your energy. Short-circuit the impulse to text your whole feed about every unease. Instead, practice deliberate containment. Name a trusted confidant who has the capacity to hold uncertainty without turning it into a verdict. Give that one person a minority share of your narrative. Use private notes to explore doubt rather than public platforms. Speak in terms of questions, not conclusions. Test hypotheses quietly. Where possible, verbalize intention rather than fear. "I am curious about this" sounds very different in the field than "I'm terrified this will fail." There is an immediate social advantage to this posture. People who hold composure while the rest of the room frets are instantly more trusted and influential. Emotional steadiness is a kind of social currency. The composed person is often asked, "What do you think?" and their answer shapes the group more than the noisy skeptic. Containment is not about denial, it is about selective transmission. You are not pretending doubt does not exist. You are refusing to give it unnecessary audience. Consider a common exchange. Someone shares a plan in a half-joking way, "I might try to leave my job." And the chorus that follows is a mix of horror and anecdote, the worst-case scenarios raining down. By the time the initial person has taken in all that commentary, their courage has shrunk. Now imagine instead a different exchange. The person says quietly, "I'm testing an exit strategy," to a single steady friend who listens and asks a few clarifying questions. The person feels held, not swamped. Their next step is sharper, less reactive, more aligned with what they actually want to test. If there's anything Friday the 13th highlights, it is how much we feed each other. Words breathe and make others breathe them back. So be selective about the air you let in and the air you exhale. Now let me name the moon's role more precisely in metaphorical terms. The moon in this narrative is a boundary keeper. She's not a puppeteer. She is a reflective surface that intensifies what's being held up to her. In some cultures, the moon is associated with cycles, tides, and inner tides. Use that language as metaphor. There are times for exposure and times for incubation. 12 is a shape that completes. Months, hours, tribes, cycles. 13 pierces that completeness. It is the next thing that has not yet been formed. Where 12 says circle closed, 13 says something new is being born, but it is unshaped. That unshaped state is vulnerable to noise. It needs containment. Think about the number 12 as a finished furniture set. Everything has a place. 13 arrives, and there is suddenly an extra chair in the room. Who is to sit in it? The form has not been decided. That uncertainty excites some and unnerves others. On a day tethered to cultural superstition, the 13th functions symbolically as a hinge. It can swing toward chaos if it's slammed by anxious commentary, or it can swing toward creation if allowed to settle gently. The moon's message is to choose the swing. This is not a call to paranoia. It is a call to responsibility. The big shift here is to reframe seeing Friday the 13th as a day of opportunity rather than risk. Opportunity because the collective is primed to react, and thus your small acts of strategic silence multiply in effectiveness. Risk because the same primed field can turn an untended seed into a spectacle before it's ready. That is the tightrope. You walk it by, moving slowly and with intention. Let me give you a brief, real-feeling vignette that came in as feedback, a short comment from someone familiar with this dynamic. They wrote that they once announced an early relationship on a public thread because they wanted to be honest. The responses ranged from congratulatory to cynical, and some old acquaintances dredged up stories meant to cast doubt. The person felt exposed and backed away quickly, confusing retreat with failure. Only later did they realize that the step back allowed the relationship to survive long enough to become what it needed to be. The early retreat was not defeat, it was protection. In retrospect, silence and a small circle of careful listeners made the difference between a public spectacle and a private, durable formation. That comment was simple, but it illustrated the whole point. Pressurized exposure often looks like failure, when in fact it can be defense. Now let's move toward practical posture. If you plan to treat Friday the 13th as an incubation-friendly day, here are tangible behaviors you can adopt. These are not rituals. They are habits of containment that respect your growth process. First, prepare a small private journal entry this evening. Name one intention, brief, precise, loving. Keep it as you would keep a fragile object. This act anchors the desire inside you rather than scattering it into comment threads. Use the journal to outline next steps in bullet sentences, not as a manifesto to be shared. The point is to clarify, not to advertise. Second, choose one or two people who have previously demonstrated emotional steadiness to be your sounding board. Tell them you are exploring something and that you need their capacity to hold questions without offering definitive commentary. This is a discipline in social selection. Favor listeners who offer questions more than quick judgments. Third, practice a speech discipline. When asked about your plans, employ neutral, contained phrases, "I'm testing something," "I'm in the early phase," or "I'm thinking through options." Avoid open invitations for critique like, "Tell me what you think." If you want feedback, ask for it at a later stage when you are looking for particular input. Fourth, tune your social feeds. Temporarily mute comment threads or reduce your posting. The impulse to broadcast is often strongest when we are unsure, but broadcasting invites external drafts that chill our internal warmth. You don't need to be invisible. You need to be deliberate. Fifth, attend to your inner regulation. Small practices, deep breathing, brief walks, a focused playlist help keep your nervous system steady so you are less likely to offload anxiety publicly. Composure is not inborn for everyone, but it is trainable. The more you practice quiet presence, the less likely you are to speak doubt into power. Sixth, when you must speak publicly, use declarative language that directs energy constructively. For example, say, "I'm in a discovery period and my next step is to test X," rather than, "I'm probably going to fail with this." One directs, the other disperses. There is a strategic advantage in playing the long game. Most people move in the short-term rhythm of relief and reactivity. The person who thinks in terms of formation, what must remain unexposed now to be strong later, wins not because they manipulate fate, but because they protect the conditions necessary for development. You might still be asking, what about emergencies or things that require immediate outside input? There are always exceptions. If a situation truly needs broad help, safety concerns, medical emergencies, legal advice, seek it from professionals and trusted systems. The advice here is about projects and personal formations that are not emergencies. The guidance to keep nascent intentions private is contextual and practical. It's about timing and containment, not about hiding harm. Let's return to the idea of collective belief shaping outcomes. Our social world is participatory. When millions of people treat a day as charged, their collective posture changes the ambient field. Not by supernatural decree, but by a cascade of human responses. People speak differently, institutions react differently, humor and fear spread in patterns. You can choose to participate in that cascade, or you can move through it with sovereignty. Sovereignty means you decide what to amplify and what to withhold. It means choosing where to place your attention, who hears you, and when your project gets light. There is a psychological clarity to this choice. When you treat certain periods as sacred for formation, times when you will not solicit mass opinion, you create cognitive and emotional space that allows ideas to consolidate. Your future self, someone who has already benefited from your restraint, will thank you. Imagine her, older by a season. She smiles because you did not waste the early breath of the project in the noise. That imagined future self is a useful interlocutor. And what would she advise? Often she says, be quiet, finish the first draft, protect the seed. We haven't yet named how to handle other people's projections on that day. You will encounter voices who love drama and will press for confession, for spectacle, for instant verdicts. When that happens, practice a simple redirect. You do not need to justify your boundaries. You can answer briefly and move the conversation. For instance, if someone asks, are you going to announce this? You might say, not yet, I'm testing a few things. If they push, you can say, I'll share when the time is right. No explanation needed beyond that. Boundaries are their own language. A common worry is, what if silence looks like secrecy and breeds suspicion? Possibly. But the alternative, noisy surrender of your fragile state, is often costlier. People can misinterpret quiet. They can also misinterpret spectacle. You have to choose which risk you can live with. For most nascent things, the danger of premature exposure outweighs the social cost of occasional misunderstanding. This entire approach reframes Friday the 13th from threat to responsibility. It removes supernatural paranoia and replaces it with agency. Responsibility, because you are responsible for the way you steward your attention. You can either let the day be a disruptor, an amplifier of other people's noise, or you can turn the day into a private ally, a time when you protect what is forming. One more practical note, use language that names containment as power. When you speak in public after a period of incubation, your words will land with more authority because they have been filtered through time and discretion. People instinctively respect a narrative that was allowed to develop, rather than one broadcast at first sight. The world tends to reward those who reveal work that looks intentional. Now, a few micro-strategies you can employ for the day itself. These are small, low-friction moves. Delay announcements. Set a time frame, 1 week, 1 month, before you go public. Put a mental sticky note. Announce only after prototype tested, or wait to share until I have one meaningful data point. Create a privacy ritual, a quick moment where you tell yourself, this is private right now, and then close your phone for a set block. Rituals anchor behavior by marking boundaries in your own mind. Design a rapid response plan for intrusive questions. A phrase or two that you can deliver to stop leakage of your thought process. Keep it short and move on. Use selective scaffolding. Create a list of 3 trusted listeners and rotate among them instead of telling many people the same thing. This prevents emotional echo chambers. Rehearse your narrative internally. Practice how you'll describe the intention when you are ready to share. Rehearsal gives you control over tone and timing when the reveal day arrives. All of these behaviors boil down to a single habit. You are intentional about where your attention goes and where it does not. You are selective about who participates in your incubation. You close the door to needless commentary and open it to disciplined testing. Before we close, let's compress the essentials into a compact, repeatable form so you can carry it into Friday the 13th with clarity. Remember 2 things. First secret, protect the nascent desire. Second secret, contain the doubt. Those are the operating principles. They are small, but their application is vast. Protect the nascent desire, treat beginnings as vulnerable, not to be showcased. Keep early-stage intentions private. Let your work breathe before you let the world name it. Contain the doubt. Do not voice every insecurity into a public field that amplifies it. Hold questions close, choose dependable listeners, and speak certainty when it serves your forward motion. Repeat this to yourself. The moon's message is not a curse. It is a boundary. She tells you quietly and clearly that there is strength in containment. The alarm in the message exists only to snap you into attention. Once you are attentive, the day becomes a tool. If this idea lands with you, take a moment now to decide one thing you'll keep private tomorrow. Choose it, name it in a private note, and decide who, if anyone, will hear about it. That small act of pre-commitment is the beginning of sovereignty. Friday the 13th will come and go. Some people will treat it with fear, some with indifference. You can treat it as a chance to care for the things in you that have not yet learned their shape. You can choose silence as strategy and composure as leverage. You can let the collective's noise roll by like weather while you tend the interior hearth. The moon sets a boundary. Respect it. When you do, the day does not control you, it allies with you. The result is not guaranteed luck, it is a better probability for growth, for intact beginnings, and for clarity. That is enough reason to listen. Share one intention you're protecting in the comments, one small thing you will keep private this Friday, and let others learn from the way you choose containment.